Right now, I'd like to welcome one of my favorite intellects of our time, best-selling author of The Parasitic Mind, and more recently, The Saad Truth. You've heard him on Joe Rogan at least 10 different times. He's been on Piers Morgan, he's been interviewed by Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, Elon Musk. The man is wanted by everyone. He's considered an international genius, really, by most people. He has an amazing podcast where he invites, well, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the brilliant Gad Saad.
Wow, thank you so much. I often have to speak at academic conferences that are full of audience members who are parasitized, so it's nice to actually be in front of sane people, so thank you for all of the love. I appreciate it. Before I start with the actual talk, I just saw this on Twitter. As I was waiting endlessly in the green room. I thought you forgot about me. So I was recently asked on a show, I can't remember the name of the show, but it was hosted by a British psychiatrist, and at the end of the show, he asked me a question that... Is this better? Yes. Okay. He asked me a question that surprisingly, no one had asked me in 30 years as a professor, and that is, what is the singular phenomenon of human behavior that has most surprised you in your 30 years career as a psychologist, as a behavioral scientist, and so on? And so I had to pause for a second, and then I thought, well, it's probably the inability of people to change their opinions once it is anchored, irrespective of the amount of evidence that you show them that suggests that they should maybe revisit their positions. And to that point, I wanted to, so this was a tweet that came out from the American Jewish Committee poll of Jewish voters in the United States. So the exit poll from the 2020 election, 68 for Biden and 30 for Trump. Now it's many years later, there is incoming information, and the latest is 61 Biden, 23 Trump. So it's the same 38-point difference. So irrespective of the amount of evidence that might have caused some Jewish people in the United States to say, well, let me revisit the fact that I voted for Biden, it hasn't moved them 1%. So one of the most difficult things that I have to face as someone who's been within the ecosystem of trying to change minds, is what are the strategies that I can use to try to change people's opinions? Now, of course, there is success. The Parasitic Mind was, a very successful book, but it is so frustrating because you really see that you're fighting this insurmountable battle against people's unwillingness to ever listen, just la, 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 I don't want to hear it. And so that theme will come up on various occasions during today's talk. So today's talk is the eternal hatred of Jews from Beirut to the West. It's a shortened talk of a longer talk I recently gave at my alma mater. I did my MS and PhD at Cornell. And as you know, Cornell used to be a hotbed of Jewish life. It is now a hotbed of anti-Jewish life. And so I went there, I was invited there to speak both about the Parasitic Mind and about Jew hatred. So this is a shortened version of this talk with some new stuff. So I hope I hate to say I hope you enjoy it because it's not really a very enjoyable topic, but here we go. So for those of you who are not familiar with my background, I'm born in Lebanon. We were part of the last remaining very small dwindling community of Lebanese Jews that had stayed in Lebanon. Much of my extended family had already left Lebanon before the start of the Civil War in 1975. Most went to Israel, some went to France, I had an aunt who went to Canada, and that's where we eventually followed her in Canada. And so we were there were at most several hundred Jews remaining, maybe 1,000, when the Civil War broke out. And so unfortunately, when the Civil War broke out, it became really impossible to be Jewish in Lebanon, and we left. I'll talk about some of the stories that took place as I was growing up in Lebanon. So the photo on the left is how Lebanon looked. The photo on the right is exactly my childhood. So it went from supposedly the Paris of the Middle East, a, quote, progressive, modern, tolerant country. And I say quote because tolerance in the Middle East has a very different connotation from tolerance in the Western mindset. You're tolerated until you're not tolerated. You're tolerated until you have to wear running shoes and run fast so that your head is not detached from the rest of your body, as happened to us. So let me give you a bit of a sense of what it was to grow up in progressive, tolerant Lebanon before the Civil War. Because oftentimes people say, oh, but that's the anti-Semitism in the Middle East, that's just because of, you know, the Israel dynamic. Nothing could be further from the truth. Jew hatred is baked within the DNA of the society. It's everywhere. It's in the most banal context to the most serious address in front of the parliament. It's everywhere. So I'm going to give you a few examples of some of the stuff I grew up with prior to the Lebanese Civil War. So the first slide I have here for you, the gentleman that you see on the left is Gamal Abdel Nasser, who was the president of Egypt. He was a hero in the Arab world because he was a pan-Arabist trying to unite all of the Arab identities under one umbrella. He was a very charismatic populist. And when he passed away, as often happens in the Middle East, people take to the streets and they engage in these kind of orgiastic lamentations. And as they were proceeding down my street, where we lived in Beirut, we lived in an area just at the border of the line that's dividing the east and west Beirut, which was a no-go zone during the Civil War. It was in the Jewish quarter, close to the Jewish quarter. And as thousands of people were passing by lamenting the death of an Egyptian president in Lebanon, the main chant was, "Death to Jews, death to Jews." Now, from the perspective of a 5-year-old, I hadn't turned 6 at that point, this is 1970, I was confused. What, Mommy, why are they screaming death to Jews? What do we have to do with this? She said, shh, be quiet, just hide, don't make yourself seen, because I was looking over the balcony. And so already there, at the age of 5, I saw that there was a problem. A whole bunch of people seemed to hate us, and we had nothing to do with the death of Gamal Abdel Nasser. And of course, some of you who follow me on social media will see me refer to Jews as the evil juice. And that actually comes from this brilliant guy who is calling for the genocide of Jews, and yet he doesn't grant us the courtesy of spelling us properly. So Jews becomes juice. And so whenever you see me referring to Jews as the evil juice, you can thank this noble person. This is, I'm right here. This is me. And in this photo, I don't know why I won't point to him, although he doesn't deserve the courtesy of not being pointed to. There is a young boy who the teacher asked us to all stand up. This is 1974, so maybe about 1 year before the start of the Civil War. So the teacher asked us to each stand up and say what we wish to be when we grow up. I want to be a nurse, I want to be a soldier, I want to be a doctor. And then one kid in that class photo stood up and said, when I grow up, I want to be a Jew killer. And everybody's raucous claps and laughter. This was progressive, tolerant Lebanon, which you're now seeing normalized in Canada, which I've been warning people for 25 years that it's coming for you. Don't think because you live in Mississauga that you'll be protected. There's 1,400 years of history that suggests that you should be paying attention. This is actual newspaper clippings. If you see here, number 1 is David Saad. That's my brother who's I have several siblings, but the next older is 10 years older than me. He was champion of Lebanon several years in a row in judo. He was the Lebanese judo champion. And it became insulting to the Lebanese authorities that this Jew was constantly winning this competition. It's embarrassing. It's shameful. In a culture of honor and shame, you know, we'll tolerate you, Jew, but don't keep winning the championship. And so they visited him to tell him that it was maybe time for him to retire, lest there might be an accident that happens to him. And he understood that, obviously, and he then moved to France. This is before the Civil War. He left to France to pursue his judo career. Now, interestingly, ironically, in 1976, once we had already emigrated to Montreal, the 1976 Olympics, you might remember, happened in Montreal. And he ended up representing Lebanon in the 1976 Montreal Olympics. So 2-3 years earlier, you were too Jewish to compete in Lebanon anymore. 2-3 years later, we'll overlook the terminal disease of being Jewish so that you can bear the flag of Lebanon. That's the reality of the Middle East that's tolerant and progressive. This is my parents' actual wedding photo. They got married, you know, we're from the Middle East, so it's old school. You get married very young. My mother wasn't yet 16, just about to turn 16, and my father was 20. And this is 1950. Knock on wood, they're both still alive. And my dad is 94, my mother is 90. Thank you. They get their good looks from me. And the reason I put this photo up is because on one of their return trips to Lebanon after having emigrated to Canada, so we left after 1 year of the Civil War, in 1980, on one of their return trips to Lebanon, you might be asking, how would you be returning to Lebanon during the Civil War? Well, we had business interests in Lebanon. They still had tons of friends there. Against the advice of many people around them, they somehow couldn't extricate themselves from Lebanon in full-blown, brutal, savage war. So on one of their return trips, they were kidnapped by Fatah, and some very bad things happened to them. They were held in captivity for about 8 days, and it's only through the high connections that we had in Lebanon that we were, I say we, I had nothing to do with it, I was 15 years old, but that my older siblings and others were able to rescue them. And after that trip, none of us have ever returned to Lebanon. So that gives you a bit of a context of the reality that we faced. And this is just a small snippet of life being Jewish in the Middle East. And again, this is in the best of context. Lebanon was truly pluralistic in the context of the Middle East. And of course, you're seeing all those signs all over the West now. Now, this is a very powerful story because it truly is the Star of David coming full circle. So the top, it's from the Parasitic Mind in the first chapter, page 6. The next memory that I have is perhaps one of the most poignant ones of my life. The flight captain declared that we were out of Lebanese airspace, at which point my mother took out a chain with a Star of David, or it might have been a chai, Hebrew symbol for life or living, placed it around my neck and said, now you can wear this, not hide your identity, and be proud of who you are. And this is, of course, a very powerful story because it really reflects the way that Jews live in those countries, where even if you're tolerated, you certainly don't advertise it. Whereas here, once we cleared the airspace, be proud of who you are. Well, now let's fast forward, look at the date of the tweet. October 21st, 2 weeks after the freedom fighters of Hamas, liberated the Nova Music Festival. This is the tweet that I put out that day. I was just picked up by my wife, who had taken our son to a soccer match. When I got into the car, this is what my son said to me, quote, "If you were wearing a Magen David, Daddy, you'd be dead," in reference to where he had just played the match. This is in Montreal. This is 2 weeks after October 7th. It's in an area that has a particular demographic group that's prevalent. And so 1975, we leave Beirut and the Star of David is put around my neck. 2023, my 11-year-old son, who's almost the exact same age I was in 1975, tells me, "You're lucky that you weren't wearing a Star of David where I just played soccer." That should be a big wake-up call. And by the way, it happens throughout, many cities in the West. Try to go to Malmö, Sweden, and wear a Star of David. Try to go to Marseille or Nice or Paris and wear a Star of David. Try to go to London. Try to go to Birmingham and see what happens. So, you can always pretend that you're living in your little Markham and Mississauga and it's not going to come get you here. It will. It's just, inshallah, a matter of time. This is the reality of Jews. I won't go through all of them, but we often hear about the genocide that's taken place in the Israel-Palestine conflict. There's been a complete erasure of Jews in the Middle East. You have the numbers on top, 265,000 in Morocco. It's now about 2,000. Lebanon is actually less than 100. I saw one estimate that placed it at under 40 Jews. But those 40 Jews don't live in a community, right? Someone got married in 1962 to a Christian woman, and yes, they're Jewish in terms of their heritage, but they're not. There's no community to call a Jewish community in Lebanon, whereas in the past there certainly was. And so if you look at all of these numbers, you see that there's almost non-existence of Jewish life throughout the Middle East. Now here is an interesting, this is Pew survey. So Pew is hardly, a right-wing survey organization. If anything, you might think that they're more on the progressive end. They do many global surveys that are very much nonpartisan. Now this is the results of what do you think of Jews across several Islamic countries. Now, if I were to tell you that, say, 10% of the sampled people had very negative, abhorrent views of the Jews, that should, perk up your ears, right? 10% is a big number. What if I tell you that the numbers are 95% in Egypt, 97% in Jordan, my country of Lebanon, 98%, Palestinian territories, 97%, and it doesn't matter whether it's the West Bank or Gaza and so on. So now let's see if we can put this all together. If you bring in hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions of people, into your societies, and they're coming in with values that place them at 95 to 99% Jew hatred, it probably doesn't take a fancy professor and evolutionary psychologist to predict whether Jew hatred is going to go up in the host country. Because a lot of the people, a lot of my super progressive academic colleagues that speak with a lisp, because they're very progressive, they don't know exactly. See, now I'm speaking with a lisp because I'm intellectual. They don't know why there's Jew hatred in the West. Well, here's why there's Jew hatred in the West. Because on any given day when I go on a diet, only 3 things could happen to my weight as a result of the decisions that I make that day. My weight can go up, my weight can stay the same, or my weight can go down. Yes, there's no other state of the world. Well, if you let in hundreds of thousands of people or millions of people that have that level of endemic Jew hatred, is it going to be that Jew hatred goes up, stays the same, or goes down? So it's really not a rocket science kind of enigma. But, of course, as we'll see later, there is something called ostrich parasitic syndrome. Bury your head in the sand and go la la la. Hopefully, if I sing and ignore it, it will go away. It won't. If your physician says you've got stage 4 pancreatic cancer, you might want to not ignore it, even though that probably means that you're going to die soon. So maybe there isn't too many things that you could do. But my point is that pay attention. Listen to the people warning you. And by the way, I hate to say it, some of the people who pay the least attention are progressive Jews. Okay. This is the United Nations. This is data from a few years ago, but the point is as valid today, if not more. This shows the number of condemnations of the entire world versus Israel. But you see, the United Nations is not at all biased. They're just going to where the truth is. So Israel has 62 condemnations. The rest of the world, you know, including North Korea, China, Pakistan, 55. So the singular country called Israel deserves more global condemnation than every other nasty actor around the world. But surely that's probably because they're non-biased. So Jew hatred is truly the canary in the coal mine. I understand that I'm speaking to an audience of, I mean, not only Jews, but many people who are sympathetic to the Jewish cause, so that you all know this. But there is something very unique and peculiar about Jew hatred. All forms of bigotry are bad. It is a cancer on the human spirit. But the virus of Jew hatred is truly unique in how it's able to mutate and attack you in a way that you lose your soul. And I know this not only because of growing up in Lebanon and so on. Just since October 7, if I were to show you the kind of hate that I've received from people, you would say it's impossible. The Nazis could not come up with this level of Jew hatred. And it's not as though I'm this incendiary guy who's saying kill all Palestinians. I mean, hardly that, right? I mean, yes, I can be spicy in my retorts, but I'm very professorial and very serious and measured, and yet the kind of stuff that I get, you wouldn't believe it. And so it truly is that when a society starts normalizing Jew hatred, that society is potentially irrevocably diseased. And so this is an expression, a saying in the Middle East: first we come for the Saturday people, and then we follow suit with the Sunday people. That's Islam saying this. So yes, we start off by getting rid of the pesky Jews, but don't think that we're not coming for you next, okay? So vote carefully when you vote in Canada. So the three sources of Jew hatred, some of you may know this, others may be surprised by it. Of course, there's the academic left, right? So those are all of the, you know, the Columbia professors, the Cornell professors, the McGill professor, well, the professors anywhere. And in a second, I'll explain how some of that hatred has come about. Then there is the, you know, the Jews won't replace us kind of Charlottesville, you know, neo-Nazi types. And then there's, of course, the Islamic sources of Jew hatred. And what really took me aback during, you know, post-October 7th is that everywhere that I turned, I had the various gangs coming after me. So it's not as though I could have a respite or I could just focus on Islamic Jew hatred. It was coming at me from every direction. So this is at Concordia. I wrote an article in the National Post. This was about a month after October 7th. Concordia University is unsafe for Jewish students and professors like me. This is the Montreal riot police. This is not Concordia security. This is the Montreal riot police standing outside of Concordia to protect its Jewish population. When I told my dean, you know, I'm currently on sabbatical leave, so luckily I have a bit of a respite, but September is coming around and I'm supposed to go back. When I told her, look, it's infeasible for me to return, it's insane. She said that there's absolutely no documented evidence that there's any Jew hatred at Concordia University. By the way, I don't know if it's legal or not. That conversation is taped. So I've got it in my back pocket. So there is no Jew hatred, but a few months later, the president of Concordia, along with 3 other presidents of universities, appeared in front of the Canadian Parliament, in front of a committee in the Canadian Parliament, or Senate, or whatever it was, right? So that's the kind of difficulties that you're now facing, where people say, there's no such thing as diabetes, you're making it up. There is no diabetes. This is an example of something that Himmler and Hitler would have been proud of. Look at the beautiful Nazi iconography. I mean, this photo is really, I mean, straight out of Nazi cartoons, right? So the left photo is The Sad Truth About Happiness, 8 Secrets for Leading the Good Life. The one that's on the right it's all over the internet. The Sad Truth About the Talmud, 8 Secrets for Enslaving the Goyim. Gad Saad, best-selling author of The Parasitic Jew. There you go. This is happening now. Most are still not sufficiently emboldened to put their real names when they send me this stuff. So there is a bit of optimism here in that it is not yet so normalized that people openly share this. But it's certainly a lot more open than it was 3 years ago. 3 years ago, I would get a lot of hate, but it wasn't because I was Jewish. Jewish was not really relevant to why people were getting angry at me. They were getting angry at me because I said that women can't have 9-inch penises, or because men can't menstruate. I actually had to go in front of the Canadian Senate to say, oh no, it really is true that men can't bear children. This is in 2017 in Canada, right? So there were all sorts of reasons why people were getting offended by my positions, but it had not too much to do with being Jewish. Whereas now, anything that I say is ultimately linked back to me being a parasitic Jew. So remember, a few slides ago, I put up a clip, a slide where I said that the first source of Jew hatred comes from the progressive left and the academic left. So I'm going to save all of the parents here who are going to send their kids to study political science at any university, or sometimes it's called Near East Studies departments. I'm going to save you $80,000 a year by telling you what's on the syllabus. You ready? Prior to 1948, Jews and Arabs lived in beautiful, peaceful, noble, inclusive Palestine. There was zero Jew hatred in the Middle East. As a matter of fact, Islam reveres the Jews. Then a bunch of bloodthirsty white Zionists from Europe with zero claims to that land created terrorism and ethnically cleansed the noble Palestinians who had accepted the Jews and protected them. Over the past 75 years, the Zionists have committed a genocide on people who simply wish to live in peace. The Zionists are modern-day Nazis, indistinguishable from those Nazis who exterminated the Jews, albeit the Jews have greatly exaggerated the numbers of Jews killed. I've just summarized for you, not facetiously, not hyperbolically, exactly what is taught at every university. So even if I go to that university without any a priori bias to the Jewish cause and to Israel, once all of my revered professors teach me this, and I have a very malleable mind, I'm 19 years old and 20 years old, and I have been inculcated in the oppressor-oppressed binary narrative, then yeah, me too, I'm going to wear the very fashionable keffiyeh and go death to Jews downtown Montreal, because I don't know any better, right? And here's an example of, you know, you often hear about a picture tells is equivalent to 1,000 words or whatever the maxim is. Well, here you've got Faris Odeh, right, the kid, you know, he's just an innocent young kid. He only has a slingshot or a rock, and then you've got the really nasty Zionist tank. Well, if I see that image and I don't know anything more, I just freeze that image, well then, yeah, me too, sign me up. The Palestinians are kind, loving, peaceful, and the Jews are inherently genocidal. Up is down, left is right, slavery is freedom. So I often put up these well, the reality is I put up these polls on Twitter because irrespective of what the results come out, my point will typically be made. So here I put up Israel is bombing Gaza today. So this is not even a month after October 7th. Because 1, Jews are inherently genocidal. 2, Hamas slaughtered and raped, well, at the time it was 1,400, I think they've downgraded to 1,200. So Hamas slaughtered and raped, whatever, 1,400 plus Israelis on October 7th. 163,119 people voted in this binary poll. Look at the results. It looks very nice. almost 55% of people thought that the bombing in Gaza was due to the inherent dispositional genocidal nature of the Jew. This is what I called amnesia of causality. October 7th, what October 7th? Just October 8th, Jews started killing beautiful, peaceful Palestinians. Here's a few other fun ones. You are most likely to receive death threats if you criticize. I mean, it literally should be Islam 100% and all the others 0. Look at that. 38%, 37.4% said that you, so here's an easy test we can do. For all of the people who answered 37.4, write your personal address and we'll do 2 experiments. In one experiment, you'll criticize Moses, and in the other one, you'll criticize Muhammad, and then we'll find out if this poll is veridical or not. But that's the kind of debauchery of the human mind that you're seeing. And it's very, very frustrating for someone like me because I'm committed to the fight. I do it at great personal and professional cost, but yet the tsunami that's coming at you is just relentless. It's unbelievable. Here's one on the right. The most likely converts to commit an act of terror are those who convert to, well, now here you might say, oh, it's pretty good news. But really? Joe DiMaggio, I just came up with that name, I don't know why, changed his name to Mordechai Richter, and he decided to join the Talmudic extremists and throw gays off rooftops. I don't know that. I don't know when that happened. It should be, again, 100-0. But yet 11% of people thought that converting to Judaism is what really will make you super violent. Nothing could be further from the truth. So now I'm going to link some of the stuff that we're talking about today, Jew hatred, to very directly to the parasitic mind. But I'm going to link it to some Jew-related stuff. But let me explain how I developed the framework from the parasitic mind. So in the animal kingdom, there are many parasites. So there's a parasite that tries to find the host to benefit its interests. Now, the parasites can be in many places. A tapeworm can parasitize your intestinal tract, right? But a neuroparasite is a parasite that tries to get to the host's brain, altering its circuitry to suit its reproductive interests, right? And so, for example, here, and I discuss many such examples in the book, on top you have what's called a wood cricket, and it gets parasitized by a neuroparasite. I mean, I don't need to mention the fancy scientific name, but it's a hairworm. When that happens, the hairworm needs the wood cricket to jump into water because it could only complete its reproductive cycle in water. But the wood cricket despises water, and so its innate instinct is to be completely away from water, yet it merrily jumps into the water and commits suicide once it is parasitized by this hairworm. So now you could see the analogy that I'm using in arguing that human beings can be parasitized by idea pathogens, right? By ideological raptor. And so in the book, I talk about how the university ecosystem has parasitized generations of students who then become our walking idiot prime minister. But the reason I mention it here is of relevance to the Jew-related issues. Well, first, what could be a greater manifestation of parasitic thinking than to be queers for Palestine, right? As I often tell people, in Gaza, they have a very, very effective conversion program. It's a gravity-based conversion program. It's 100% effective. We implement it on you, and voila, you're no longer queer, right? So imagine if your goal is to present yourself to the world with your queerness as being your primary identity that you present to the world. That's good for you. But then would you want to side with Tel Aviv, where there is one of the most vibrant ecosystems for queer people, short of Montreal, San Francisco, and New York. Tel Aviv is one of the most queer-friendly places. But see, they're super progressives, and so they know that the real progressive kudos comes from supporting the noble Gazans. Now, here we've got Jewish Anna Epstein. Does anybody know who Anna Epstein is? Right. So Anna Epstein is so progressive as a Jew, not unlike you guys. You're Cretans, but she's progressive because she goes to a fancy American school, so that she was one of the ones that was caught on tape, being recorded, very angrily taking down the posters of the Jewish babies that were kidnapped. So imagine, I hope that her parents are facing great consternation, because they said, well, wait a minute, so I'm paying $80,000. On Saturday, we have to go to the synagogue, and then on Thursday, you're pulling out the... Now, by the way, had she been at the Nova Music Festival, there would have been a really nice case of gang unreported lovemaking, also known as rape, but we don't want to say rape because that marginalizes the rapist. So I call it undocumented lovemaking. So there is Anna Epstein, super progressive. Of course, you've got chickens for KFC is not mine, but the one on the left is mine because I speak French. Geese for foie gras. Progressive, tolerant. Oh, I'm just getting warmed up. Fasten your seatbelts. It's only Amir told me that it has to be a shorter talk. Otherwise, I would have kept you here till tomorrow morning, till my flight. Let me talk to you about this fantastically progressive and bright doctoral student, Jewish doctoral student, Tal Nitzan at Hebrew University. Ooh, that sounds serious. Now, Tal Nitzan is so progressive, Israeli Tal Nitzan, Jewish Tal Nitzan, that she wanted to do her doctoral work demonstrating how vile and violent the IDF soldiers are. They're engaging in rampant orgiastic rape of Palestinian women. So she did the hard work, and she went and looked for those cases. She found not a single instance of rape. Guess what she concluded? Don't read the thing. I want to see if only if you haven't read what the final thing is. Can anybody? Yes.
I guess Israeli soldiers too racist rape.
Very good. But I think you cheated. You read it. No? Okay, well, that's very good, because usually when I pose this to people, they could never think so diabolically, so parasitically. So it turns out that her hypothesis was validated. Israeli soldiers are truly diabolical, because had they engaged in rape, they would have been evil. But the fact that they didn't engage in rape because they are so othering the Palestinian women that they don't consider them worthy of rape is also a form of existential rape. How are you going to survive as a Jewish person if you've got Tal Nitzan running the show? See, so this is what happens when you go to university and you are taught by progressive professors. Here's another one. I mean, these are the actual passages from the book. I won't read them. I'll just summarize them. So I was approached by a woman, this must have been, 2010. She's a Jewish woman. Some of her family members had gone through the Holocaust. So you would think she's, she's attuned to some of these realities. She approached me and said, hey, Gad, you know a lot about Islam and so on. I have a friend of mine who's a PhD student in whatever, Islamic studies I think it was at McGill. And she's saying that, Islam is, a religion of peace. Islam loves the Jews, blah, blah, blah. So what is the truth? And so, okay, I want to engage her. I mean, she's asking honestly. She wants to know. So I shared with her a montage of various sources not only imams, I mean, largely religious figures, but it could have been journalists, it could have been politicians, it could have been kids in kindergarten, comedy shows, Lebanese soap operas. And so it's this maybe 22, 24-minute montage where they are sharing what they think of the Jews. And it's stuff that really would make Hitler feel a bit ashamed. No, that's too much Jew hatred for me, Hitler would say, right? When I shared this with her, her response was, you are no different in your extremism than them. So then, again, let's summarize. She approaches me out of the blue and asks me, what is the reality about Islam when it comes to the Jews? I don't editorialize anything. I simply share first-hand sources of what they say in their own words. She concludes that I'm the extremist. Now, to her credit, 14 years later, about 3 months ago, I received an email from her, and because now she's seeing what's happening in Montreal, and she said, yeah, I think you were right. I shouldn't have answered you the way that I did 14 years ago. But it took her 14 years before she realized. Let's continue with the parasitic thinking. The guy on the left refers to himself as a feminist and anti-racist ally, activist. He's a Norwegian man. He lives in Norway. In 2013, he was raped, sodomized, by a Somali immigrant. The Somali immigrant was found guilty. He served a very minimal sentence because the Scandinavians are very progressive. They don't believe in the penal system. And so after spending something like 3 years in prison, he was going to be deported. Yes? Well, this super kind and empathetic person felt horrible about the fact that his sodomizer was now going to go back to Somalia where he couldn't live a full life. So I'm an evolutionary psychologist, so I understand one or two things about, how emotions evolve. The emotion of vindictiveness, revenge, exists because under certain circumstances, it makes perfect adaptive sense for us to feel that. If you come to try to rape my daughter, well, you better hope that you're successful and kill me, because otherwise I'm coming from after everybody in your family and killing all of them. And it is that dynamic that keeps tribe A from not attacking tribe B. That's the stuff of history. But imagine if now you have a society where it is laudable to do all the things that millions of years of evolution has allowed your brain to properly respond to certain conditions. And so usually you would not expect that if you're raped, you set up an allyship with your sodomizer, but in Norway they do. Here is one that I put up not too long ago. Noble immigrant says, please, please, please let me into your beautiful country. I just want a chance at a better life. The West says, okay, welcome in. Noble immigrant, 15 seconds after being in the host country. This country is disgusting. I will protest against it. I will march in support of the ideology from which I escaped. I hate this society. I hate its values. I hate its freedoms. I hate everything about this place. Long live the society from which I escaped. The West responds, this is wonderful. The best way to move forward is to grant entry into millions of more people who hate our societies. It will all work out because progressive empathy. That's the topic of my next book, Suicidal Empathy. The emotion of empathy is perfectly valid, and there are very clear evolutionary reasons why we've evolved the emotion of empathy. Certainly as a social species, you want to have the capacity to be empathetic towards your conspecifics, your people in the same species as you. But the problem is when an emotion misfires, or the problem is when an emotion misfires to the wrong target. So you end up with, it's more important to let in millions of people from El Salvador than it is to invest in your American veterans, right? So the empathy is being misdirected to the wrong target. It is more important to allow the homeless people to shoot up in the park than to have a space for children to be able to play. And so the next book is going to be exactly on that. What happens when you have a society that's completely parasitized by this suicidal empathy? So get ready. And then finally, the one on the right, which has become the I now satirize it all day long on my social media platform. So please, 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 if you see Jewish students being attacked on university campuses, Jewish elementary schools being shot at, elderly Jews being attacked, make sure to increase your commitment to fight Islamophobia. Okay? So it's, and there is never a simple condemnation of Jew hatred. It always has to be coupled with Islamophobia. Well, there is this thing called data. And you can see whether Canada is experiencing rampant Jew hatred or rampant Islamophobia. But that's what happens when your politicians are parasitized. Here's another example of parasitic thinking. Some of you may, but I suspect that many of you may not have heard of the industrial scale level of grooming gangs in England, in Britain, throughout up and down Britain. This is for the past 25 years. But I mean, when I say industrial scale level, I really mean that. I don't mean 7 cases. Hundreds and hundreds of cases in many, many cities. In all those cases, I mean 99% of the cases, they tend to, the perpetrators of undocumented lovemaking tend to originate from one particular group. But in Europe, they've developed these very progressive euphemisms. So in France, the folks that come from that ideological background are called les jeunes. Les jeunes means the youths. In England, they're called Asians. Well, I'm Asian. I'm from Lebanon, but it certainly doesn't refer to me. It doesn't refer to people from India who are Hindu. They're Asian, right? But you can't say what they are exactly. So let's see if the collective wisdom of this beautiful large crowd can crack this mystery for us. Because I don't have the big data analytic abilities to be able to come to the right conclusion. So I'm going to read some names. This is the lineup of one small town in Huddersfield. They caught the gang rapists. These are usually they're grooming little British girls, white girls that are 12, 13, 14. Okay? And I mean, we're talking, you know, years of gang rapes. Okay? So here are some of their names. You ready? Irfan Ahmad, Zahid Hassan, Muhammad Kamir, Muhammad Rizwan Aslam, Abdul Rahman, Nahman Muhammad, Wikas Mahmoud, Muhammad Irfraz, Muhammad Azim, Muhammad Akram, and Muhammad Imran Ibrar. Anybody want to try to guess what they have in common? Because I haven't been able. All Jews. Yes. Well, Irish Jews. Well, I mean, thank you for that moment of levity, but actually, I did put this up on my social media, and I did ask my followers exactly the same sarcastic question, and many, many people wrote to me, not facetiously, saying, you know who's to blame for this? Jews. Do you know why? Anybody? And don't, if you've heard me say it, don't cheat. Anybody who hasn't heard, yes, go.
We control media.
It's a bit more, the Jew is more diabolical than this, so you have to come up with it. Sorry? Well, not quite.
Because Jews are trying to get all of these immigrants to come to the West.
Right. So, very good. So, how did Muhammad, all the Muhammads here, how did they get into Rockdale and Oxford and Huddersfield? The Jews. It's the Jewish cabal with its open society ethos that has let them in. So remember, this is a very important mathematical equation. When 3 Muhammads gang rape your daughter, it's Mordechai that's to blame. So you keep it with the M's. It's just you replace Muhammad by Mordechai, or if you prefer Moses, you could go with Moshe. But they're not saying this to me facetiously, right? So these are thousands and thousands of people who reply to me to this data, and they can't turn their ire to the right causal agent. This proves that it's the Jew that's responsible for the gang rapes. So imagine the kind of fight we have on our hands when you can't get people to say, okay, well, maybe in this case it's not the Jews. No, this proves that it's the Jews. Here's another good one. You see up there, this is from a very reputable site that catalogs all of the terror attacks since 9/11 alone. And we're now at 45,385 terror attacks in the name of one religion in nearly 70 countries, okay? The existence of gravity is not as clear as what the conclusion should be here. Do you know what all our politicians and all of our bien-pensant professors have told us? By the way, these are, right here, are some of the causes that have been proposed. Causes in quotes. People think that when I'm doing this, I'm just being my humorous self. I'm not. These are literal examples. So let's go through a few of them. So remember, there's been 45,000 plus terror attacks where the person goes up in front of a camera, says, I'm about to do this, and here are the specific quotes from my holy book why I'm doing this, right? So there's really nothing to debate. Yes? All right. It's due to lone wolfism. That's the real cause. It's due to man-made disasters. It's due to violent video games. Which of us didn't play Galaga in 1981 and go ahead and bombed a bus stop in Tel Aviv? The fourth one is a really good one. Lack of adequate exposure to art. That one was for some terror attacks in Belgium. I think it was Belgium. I mean, look, if I don't see enough Salvador Dali or Chagall, I'm joining ISIS. The causal link is very clear. No Chagall, I throw gays off rooftops. But this, by the way, again, these are my colleagues saying this, right? This is not a person who escaped from a psychiatric institute. Well, they are a psychiatric institute. They're called professors, okay? It's due to beard bullying. The San Bernardino case about 10 years ago, husband and wife team, I think from Pakistan, it's because at work they were beard bullying him. That's why I keep my beard really tight, because if it grows longer, and then some of you may tease me about it, here comes ISIS. Bill Nye, the science guy, explained to us that the Bataclan attack in Paris, where 180 plus people were mowed down, where the guys who mowed them down said why they did it, he said, oh no, it's because of lack of solar panels. It's climate change. How are you going to win the war to save civilization when those are the voices that are being heard? It's due to climate change, really? It's due to solar panels? And it goes on and on and on. And here, since 9/11 alone, in nearly 70 countries, at the time when I put up this tweet, they were only at 44,000. 44,000 plus terror attacks were committed in the name of one religion. Which is it? Well, 10% said that the 44,000 attacks at that point were committed by Jews. That's a tough, I mean, you know, you could love the IDF for all their physical heroism, but boy, are we losing the informational war. When it comes to that, there's no IDF. We truly are wimps because the other guys are completely winning it. All right, I only have a couple of more slides and then we can have our chat. This is a tweet that actually went, it surprised me, but it really went viral. I put it out about 2 weeks after October 7th because I was really feeling quite dejected. And I think one of the reasons why it went viral is because a lot of people suddenly woke up and took notice because they said, oh, if this, I'm often referred to colloquially as the happy warrior, because as you can see, even when I'm talking about serious subjects, I try to introduce my sarcasm and satire and humor and so on. But here, I wasn't, so I'm going to read it to you, because hopefully it might wake you up if you're still sleeping. I'm a very oh, you're not going to like this tweet, so turn away if you are likely to be triggered. I'm a very optimistic person. I'm a fighter for Western values and liberties. I'm a dogged defender of science, reason, and common sense. I must say, though, that I'm unsure that the West can recover from its multi-front civilizational suicide. Yes, I've talked about these issues for decades and wrote a book about it, but the past few weeks, this is, remember, just shortly after October 7th, the past few weeks have crystallized the extent to which the problem has become intractable. It will be a long and ultimately bloody demise, and the West will be the first society in recorded history to fully self-implode due to its parasitic ideological rapture. It is a gargantuan Greek tragedy that will shape the future of humanity. This is not hyperbole. Your grandchildren will pay a very high price for your progressive arrogance rooted in the pursuit of unicornia that only exists in the recesses of deeply flawed, parasitized minds. And believe me, I won't get into details, but that tweet, amongst some of my other work, got the attention of some astoundingly powerful people. And so that's the good news, in that some people who truly have the means to contribute to the battle are waking up and are reaching out and saying, okay, let's talk. And so, but I say this only to infuse a bit of hope, in that, you know, this is quite a negative, dour tweet, but I think people are waking up. I'm almost done. So a call to action. In chapter 8, in the last chapter of the parasitic mind, I have several calls to action, one of which has become, one that people associate with. I say, activate your inner honey badger. And the reason I do that, so if you could see here, the honey badger is the smaller black and white animal. It's the size of a small dog, but it is so fierce and ferocious that it can actually intimidate a whole pride of adult lions that don't mess with it. And the reason for that is because it's just astoundingly ferocious. It's insane. And so when I tell people activate your inner honey badger, what I mean by that is be ideologically fierce, defend your principles, don't cower at every opportunity. Now, some of us have that temperament dispositionally, so that it's easier for us. You know, I'm a very affable person, but I can be combative if you attack me. So for some of us, it might be easier than others, but we all have the capacity within our sphere of influence to affect change. So get involved. Now, you're all here. That's great. That's a first step. You're clearly involved. But, you know, your professor says something that's contrary to reality, challenge him or her. Your friend says something at the pub that you think is worthy of a conversation, challenge them nicely. Don't constantly walk away because there's always a reason to walk away. Believe me, I receive 1 million emails. Let me summarize it for you. Dear Professor Saad, a bunch of compliments, and then the last sentence, and if you were planning on reading this email, please don't mention my name. Right? And then I write back, dear so-and-so, thank you for the compliments. Don't you think that the last line is precisely why we are in the current problem we're at? And then usually they wake up, right? So they want to support you, but while incurring not a single millimeter of cost. But I have to duck and weave from the death threats, right? You're not doing it, but if you do it and you do it and you do it, it becomes a lot harder to kill all of us. Number 2. This is, don't get drunk by smelling the cork of the wine bottle. This is a direct translation from an Arabic expression. And getting drunk from the wine of the cork bottle, so let's assume that this is the cork of the wine bottle. So see, I'm getting drunk. Now, it refers to the fact that you are of weak constituency, right? Meaning that you don't actually need to drink the wine for you to get drunk. But when applied to your cognition, as I apply it, it means that I can easily sway you simply by making you drink. So look now, I'm gonna drink, look, I'm getting drunk. I'm gonna drink the cork of Justin Trudeau. Oh my God, he's got beautiful hair. Huh. Oh my God, he's tall. See, I'm just the height of Messi. As someone reminded me that who picked me up, it's true, you're too short to be Prime Minister of Canada. That was a beautiful welcome to Toronto. But in any case, right, he's tall, he's young. He seems like he's got a nice family. So he does yoga, he's progressive. So you see, you're getting drunk. Now look, I'm gonna get drunk on Donald Trump. He's disgusting. I revile him. He's cantankerous. He's an ogre. He's fat. At no point did I say I like him or hate him because of his fiscal policy. I like him or hate him because of his immigration policy. Because that would be too effortful to actually engage in, oh, what's that word? Think, right? Therefore, it's a lot better to just use these peripheral cues that can get me drunk, and then hopefully we can go back to living our lives. And then number three, I mean, this is more relevant to the US university ecosystem because you have a greater tradition of kind of donor, altruism and philanthropy. But now certainly a lot of rich Jews are linking their donations to specific policies that the universities take. This has happened at Harvard, it's happened recently at Columbia, at many schools, right? But it's taken a very, very long time for a lot of these folks to wake up. And then last slide, I think. So you always want to end, with some prescriptions. So how to save the West? In order for the West to win the civilizational battle, it must, now this applies to Jews, but more generally, it's a defense of the West. Number one, proudly and unequivocally defend Western values. Number two, reject cultural relativism and the unicornia vision of multiculturalism. Three, recommit to individual dignity over the celebration of collective identity politics. 4, recognize that all cultures are not equal. 5, recognize that all religious beliefs are not equally consistent with Western values. 6, recognize that all immigrants are not equally likely to assimilate and adopt Western values. 7, recognize that immigrants who espouse intolerable values that seek to destroy our civilization will be deported en masse. 8, implement a rational immigration policy that recognizes the importance of cultural homophily, meaning choosing immigrants who hail from cultures that possess similar values to those of the host nations. And 9, exhibit zero tolerance for seditious belief systems. Such systems can be criminalized if they constitute an existential threat to our freedoms and liberties. Thank you very much.